Hi guys, so in this lecture we are going to continue our discussion on type conversion. So JavaScript variables can be converted to a new variable and another data type by the use of JavaScript function or automatically by JavaScript itself. So the first thing that we will see today is the type conversion into string. So let's first try to convert or type convert a number to a string. We already know that if we need to have a string conversion, the way we do it is you either do a toString and which is available on all the objects, or you can cast it into a string object and pass in the value as a parameter. So you can have pass in as a number, or you can pass in a variable and it will cast it to a string. Now let's see an example when we say number to string. Okay. Now let's create a variable x is equals to, let's say 10. Let's do a console.log. Then let's try to do a string of x. And let's try to run it. So let's close output, open the console and run it. So the answer is 10. So it converted it to a string. You can see the quotes and that's a string. It's not necessary that you store it into a variable. You can just pass anything here like a 1, 2, 3 and it should still run and give you 1, 2, 3 as a string. Similarly, it doesn't matter if you have a string or you have output as a string. Let's say you have 120 plus 3. In this case also it should give you 123 as a string because that's the output. And you can do the same thing with your .toString. So let's try to do that also. Let's try to do x.toString and see what the answer would be. Similarly, let's try to do 123.toString and let's do 120 plus 3.toString. The answer should still remain the same. It's clear. Let's run. Okay, it seems that the problem is that I need to put the 123 into quotes because otherwise everything else should work correctly. Let's try to run this. And the answer is 1, 2, 3. Now instead of doing this, let's try to put it in the same line. So it's easier for us to read. Just copy this instead of the comma so that it appears in the same line. It's clear. Let's run. And you can see both the outputs are still a string and you can see it out there. So these are the two ways of doing string conversion for a number. Again, there are a lot of number methods that you might be interested, and if you do not recollect, you can go back to the number methods class. The next set that comes in is converting booleans to string. So booleans to string. Now how do we do that? Well, just like we can do a type conversion for numbers to string, we can do it for booleans to string. Everything remains the same. All you will change is what you pass in the parameter. So you can again do it with the string. So let's say console.log string object and you can pass in the boolean what you want to. Let's say I want to pass in a false and that will be printed. The other option is console.log and let's try to do a true.toString. In either case, it should give us an output of string onto the screen. Okay, it should be braces. Let's try run again. So it's false or it's true, and both are strings. We can also do date conversions just the same way. Let me just quickly copy this so it's easier for us. Let's do date. Let's do date, and instead of string, let's pass in a date. Let's say new date. Let's do a new year. So 1/1/2017. Okay, that was for the new date on the string. Let's try to do the same thing for toString. So let's just copy the new date here and let's change the date to 2 so that we can see what the answer is. And the answer is here. So that's how you can convert dates to string as well. Again, there are a lot of other methods that the date object provides and you can go over it in the date methods lecture. Now what if you want to convert strings to numbers? So again, we saw everything converting to string. Now we want to do this vice versa, which means we need to convert a string to a number. So again, just the way we had the string object, we also have a number object. So let's try to make use of it. So let's copy this. Let's copy this and let's say number to string. Oh, we already numbered it. This is a string to number. So string to number. String to number. Now let's do the first one where we just do a number and then we pass in the data as a string. So let's say we pass in 3.14, and we can also copy this and just let's try to do an empty string with the space, and let's try also empty string without the space, and let's try to give two numbers, let's say 10 and 20. So let's see the results for them. This got converted to a number, this became a 0, this became a 0, and this became a not a number. The reason is the moment number sensed a space, it meant that it's a string and it cannot convert it to a number anymore. In that case, it's still converted to a number object, because if you want to just do a type of this, let's do a type of this number, it'll give you the type as number, but the value will become not a number. Let me just revert this. Let's clear, let's run, and it's not a number. There is another way you can convert a string to a number, and that's called a unary operator. So what, just the plus operator that we have. So let's take an example where y is equals to 15 and variable x is equals to plus y. And let's try to do a console.log y, and it should give us value as 15 without the quotes because it's a number. I think so. Discard and okay, the value is 15 without the quotes, which means it's a number. But what if I try to do the same thing with a string object? So let's say instead of reassigning the value, let's try to do this. Let's try to make y is equals to John and plus y and console.log, not y but x, my bad. That's why it worked, because it even then had the value of 15, but this should be 15 and this should be not a number. Again the same logic, because it sensed that it's not a number, so it converted to a type of number with the value nan, which is this. Easy peasy, right? So you can very well do the type conversions. Now let's try to do the same thing with what we did for strings, which was booleans. Now let's try to convert it to a number. So instead of booleans to string, let's try to do booleans to a number. Instead of string, let's do a number of false. So it's easy, and then let's copy this so that we can do a true as well. And it's obvious because the entire programming language is zeros and ones. The false will be a 0 and the true should be a 1. Let's try to run it, and it's 0 and 1. Similarly, you can do dates to number, and I will give you a pause to think what the answer would be, because we have covered this in the dates chapter. So dates to number, so think, and let's try to do a new date, and let's, even you can pass in a date or you don't pass in a date, it should still process it. But what would be the answer? Well, dates are always as a timestamp, so this converted to a number will give you a timestamp from 1970 January 1. We also have some automatic type conversions in JavaScript, but again these automatic type conversions are, sometimes unpredictable because you don't know what will happen. Automatic type conversions. Now let me show you a couple of examples so that it's clear on what I'm saying. Let's try to go down and let's try to do a console.log, and let's try to do the first example, which is, let's say 5 plus null. We've already seen this in the numbers chapter, but I'm going to go do that again, and the answer would be 5 because null is converted to a 0, which is a number again. Let's try to do something else. let's try to make this 5 a string. Let's run this and let's see. And now number null is converted to a string because you're adding it to a string. So here you were adding it to a number, so it got converted to 0, but here it got converted to a null. So it can behave differently on what it is added to. Let's take another example where instead of null I pass in a number, let's say 2. In this scenario the answer will still be 52 because the first is a string and then you do a concatenation of a string to a number, it converts it to a string. But the moment you do something else, let's say you do a subtraction, because concatenation operation is available for strings, but if you do a subtraction, the same 5 will be converted to a 5 number and the answer would be 3. Because minus is not there for strings. There's no operator for strings which is a minus or a negative sign. But for numbers there is, and that's why the 5 got converted to a number versus a 2 converted to a number. What if we had 2 as a string? What would happen then? Let's do a multiplication instead of plus, and let's do a 2 in the quotes. Clear this, run this, and the answer will be 10 because again multiplication is nothing in as a string which is not an operator. So it converted this to 2 and this to 5 and the answer is 10. Just like we have type conversions automated for numbers, we also have something for string. So JavaScript will automatically call the variable's toString function when you try to output something as a variable or an object. So whenever you do a console.object, you don't have to specify if it's a string. It always puts it as a string, right? Because JavaScript automatically converts or calls its toString method before it prints it out. Now let's see a very good example. We have seen a lot of examples on the type conversions. Let's see a graph or a table that can surprise you with the values. So I'm not sure if you can see, but if you have an original value of false, you convert to a number, you get a 0. If you convert to a string, you get a false, and convert it to a boolean will give you a false. So you can see the entire type conversion with different type of values. This is a small chart I will be sharing with you, so it's easy for you to reference. And the ones which are in red, there is a reason for it to be in red, because what happens is usually programmers don't expect it to be that value. So let's see an example. So 0 in strings will give you value 0 in number, when string it will be 0, but when you convert it to a boolean it will be a true and not a false, because 0 is related to a false as a number, but when you have anything in a string, which means even if it's a blank string, it will still give you a true. Similarly, you can see that a 000 will again give you a true, because it doesn't matter if the value is 0, it is a string, and if the string contains value it will give you something. But the moment there is no string, it will give you a value of false, and the value number would be 0. Similarly, if you pass in an array and there is nothing in the array, the number value of it would be 0, but if you have something in the array, the number value will be that number 20. So as an exercise, if you can do all these into a console log and check if you get the right output by converting into all three, that'll be awesome. So you can just stop the video here on type conversion, do this exercise, and probably let me know your answers or JSBin URLs into the Q&A section so that I can go and see if you did perform that or no.